Now that the essentials were decided upon, everything began happening in a blur. Strategy meetings dominated the mornings. The leaders of each group met in the council chambers for long hours. There they decided on various plans of attack. Such plans included who would watch what areas, among other things Anwen had no attention span for. She was more than happy to exclude herself from them. The afternoons were spent in training and other preparations. Anwen wasn't sure what she should be doing, so she went along with Courtney and those in her group of mages and dragons. Having come late to the game, she watched more than participated. At least she did what Tyler and Kern allowed her. The rest of the time she spent either in quiet meditation or learning more of the basic skills required of a mage. At night she dreamed of the Revenants. Each time they seeped into her dreams, they seemed to move closer and closer to the mountain. Part of her wished to pass these off as her fears speaking, but she knew better. Just as she knew the visions she'd only had a week before were real. She knew these were as well. And every morning she reported these dreams to the council. It didn't take long for the Revenants to break Matthias' shield. Whether this was because of a weakening of wards due to age or for some other reason, no one seemed to know. They all hoped it wasn't due to the fact that the Revenants might have grown in strength, or that as the strength of the dragons had waned, so had the wards. Either was possible, but what was certain was the fact that the Revenants were closer now than they had ever been, and they were coming in full force. Anwen couldn't even begin to calculate how many she saw in her dreams, but it was beyond imagining. She only hoped she was wrong in what she saw, that it was more fear-induced than actual numbers. If not, they were in trouble, even with the added help of the lost mages. Walter and Leslie seemed to work a lot together, exchanging what they knew of their foe. Since Walter had seen a Revenant get taken down by a dragon, he had more hands-on knowledge than the Walker did. But Leslie had more skills with various spells and abilities designed to take them down. Realizing he was no match for their prowess, he began making plans of his own. With the help of several villagers, Walter made a few trips back to his storage locker in Blossy. There he kept far more goodies than what he'd used before. He wasn't sure what kind of abilities the Revenants had, or if they were into modern technology. So to be safe, the veteran decided to go all out with his choice of weaponry. He got permission to set up target practice near Lake Wyvern where he wouldn't get in anyone's way. There he worked on honing his sniper skills. Not satisfied with just that, he used Leslie to help him with his hand-to-hand combat skills. The two often went off into the woods to practice on all terrains, leaving the mages to Sarah's care. More often than not, they would return at the end of the day, sweaty and worn out. Despite this, they both seemed to have a lilt to their steps that hadn't been there before. Anwen also practiced combat skills. With Tyler as teacher, she learned how to control the blade that was also Master Key. And after some intense lessons, she could defend herself with the blade against the more basic attacks. At least enough to hold her own in a fair fight. She knew nothing about the upcoming battle would be fair. As such, she tried to focus most of her efforts on meditation and tuning into her other senses. Instinct was her best weapon, and she knew it. Then came one night where they all gathered together inside the mountain fastness. They were all there, mages and dragons alike. Something felt different about this night. It was as though they waited for a storm to break overhead in devastating glory. Last-minute traps and snares had been set inside the ruined city. Those included extra caches of weapons and gear, mostly Walter's. The mages had trained to use whatever was at hand. A chill wind tried to find its way into the crevices of the mountain stronghold, but the closed gates repelled the force. It was the wrong kind of wind for the summer season. It whistled and hissed around the outcroppings, almost as if searching out the lay of the land. And underfoot, the ground trembled as with the tread of many heavy feet. Anwen chose not to sleep in her room that night. Instead, she huddled close to her friends. Leslie and Walter sat next to each other around an orb she'd produced. Sarah sat not too far off from her leader, only with a separate group. The effort it took to produce a light like that had decreased with a lot of practice. Unfortunately, the Keda still had trouble with some of the more simple spells. Tyler sat next to her, in mortal form, with Courtney on the other side. Callum and Curran paced through the front gallery where they'd camped out. Several dozen or so dragons went about with final preparations. They ran last-minute errands or hunkered down for the night. The village mages had formed tentative friendships with some of the lost tribe. Even with that, most kept to their own. Circumstances hadn't allowed much time to try and reintegrate the two groups, but those who had found acceptance tended to stick together. An uneasy alliance was better than none at all, especially when they were all on the same side. The conversation was terse. No one seemed inclined to say much as they each dwelt in their own thoughts. The air was thick with unspoken words and promises that couldn't be made. No one knew if these unsaid words would mean anything in the morning, let alone when all was said and done. The fact that they could sit so was more than enough. Anything else would only feel insincere or out of place. Anwen fiddled with the ring on her finger. She hadn't seen her mother's form since that one night while searching out the mages. She hadn't exactly thought to call upon her either. Despite that, she couldn't help but feel a sense of finality coming close. Would she even have someone to pass the ring on to? Or would this be it? She had no answers, and didn't want any. All she wanted was to sit next to Tyler and her friends, and hope dawn would never come. Smoke filled the air as the sun's first rays filtered through the sky. The diluted atmosphere made the light shatter in unnatural patterns. The full glory of the sun couldn't reach the ground. The air had an almost acrid scent to it. It tasted like burnt things, and there was enough of a hint of electricity as an aftertaste to choke sensitive throats. One by one, the various groups marched out from the gates of eternity. From there, they went down to their respective stations. The line of marching figures extended to what seemed like miles. Each group went single file through the high-reaching gateway. Courtney led her group off towards the far side of the mountain. They headed down the path she and Tyler had used to evacuate Anwen from the heights almost a month ago. She knew they wouldn't stay there long. Leslie's group disappeared into the shadows. The other, less trained mages formed small groups down past the endless chasm. With luck, they would only have to act as support instead of frontline soldiers. Tyler paused at the end of his group. He had yet to return to dragon form as he pulled Anwen to one side while the other dragons marched into the open.
Try to stay alive,
he requested as he cupped her face in his hands.
I don't want to lose you again.
His eyes glistened as he bent to kiss her on the forehead.
You do the same.
Anwen requested.
I want to meet up with you again, when this is all over.
She threw her arms around him in an embrace.
Stay safe.
And then she let him go, watching as he returned to his draconic form the moment he cleared the frame of the gateway. Curran disappeared before the sun rose. No one seemed to know where he'd gone. Some hazarded that he'd headed out to the sacred island and the shrine within. No one dared to try and confirm this, though. If he wanted them to know, he would have told them. Callum paced as he waited for everyone to finish emptying the mountain. None would be left inside. This was an all-or-nothing effort. It was better that the mountain be sealed away for eternity if they did not win. No one wanted to contemplate what it would mean to have the Revenants take control of the heart. Once all had finally left the confines of the stronghold, Anwen stood and faced the gates. She held the master key in her hand and raised the blue stone high in the air as Callum stood nearby.
I am Anwen, K. the Porter,
she intoned.
The Master Keeper of Tarragon.
The key flashed in the low light, almost as if from some internal source.
With this, I seal these gates and this mountain against all who would enter to do harm. I seal the wards and the strongholds against all who do not belong. As the Master Keykeeper, I do this for all to see. Let the seal remain intact until I am able to release it. But if such is not allowed, let them remain closed forever.
Blue light scattered all around the pathway, leading to the gates now pressed closed. Anwen stepped towards them and thrust the key deep into the stone slabs and turned it a quarter turn. A low rumbling filled the air as the wards activated, a webwork of blue lining the doors before it faded into the rock. Anwen turned away from the smooth wall, key clutched in one hand. She walked towards the ruined city, pacing the path. As she passed Callum, she gave him one curt nod before continuing on. For better or worse, it was done. She only hoped she would live to open them once more.